The Holy Quran says in Surah An'am, chapter number 6, verse number 38, that we have created every living animal that lives on the earth and every bird that flies on the wings in the air to live in communities like you. Today, science has discovered that even the animals and birds live in community like the human beings. The Quran describes the flight of the bird in Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse number 79. That do you not look at the bird subjected in the midst in the air? None of them can hold them up except with the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran repeats in Surah Mulk, chapter 67, verse number 19. Do you not observe the birds above you? They spread their wings and they fold it. None can hold them up except with the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He watches over all things. This verse of the Holy Quran, there is a very striking resemblance with what modern science has discovered today, that the birds have got a certain migratory programming in the nervous system. That's the reason that young birds, without any prior experience, can take flights of thousands of miles without a guide. And they come back to the departure point also. And a very good example is given by Professor Hamburger in his book, Power and Fragility of the Mutton Bird. The mutton bird lives in the Pacific. It has a journey of more than 15,000 miles, and it takes about 6 months. And it comes back to the departure point in a delay of not more than 1 week. How is it possible? The scientists say there has to be a certain programming of these birds. Who is programming them? But natural, as the Holy Quran says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds them up. The Arabic word amsaka, meaning to seize or to hold. The Quran says in Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse number 68 and 69, that it is the Lord who has taught the bees to build cells in hills, in trees, and human habitations, and to eat of what the earth produces, and to find the spacious path of the Lord with great skill. What does the Quran mean by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught the bee to find the spacious path of the Lord? Von Frisch, who was a scientist, he got the Nobel Prize in 1973 when he described the behavior of the animals, especially the communication method of the bee. And today we have come to know that whenever a worker bee finds a new flower or a new garden from where it can take nectar, it goes and tells its fellow bees the exact direction and map of that new flower or garden. It's called as the bee dance. Only today we have come to know by high photographic methods how is this communication given. The gender used in the Holy Quran in these verses of Surah Nahl chapter 16, verse 68 and 69 is a female gender, kulli or fasluki, which means a female bee. Previously we thought it was the male bee which was the worker bee. No wonder Shakespeare in his play Henry IV, he writes that the soldier bee, the male bee, goes and reports to the king. Today we have come to know it is not the king which they report to, it's the queen. And the worker bee is not the male bee, it's a female bee. Imagine, Quran speaks about the gender of the worker bee 1400 years ago, which we have discovered today. The Holy Quran says in Surah Ankabut, chapter 29, verse number 41, that as to those who take for protectors anyone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they build for themselves houses like that of the spider. And verily, the house of the spider is fragile, it is delicate. Besides the Quran saying that anyone who takes for protectors anyone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the physical nature of the house will be like that of the spider, fragile, delicate, flimsy. It also gives a reference to the family life. which we have come to know today, that many a times the female spider kills the male spider. The Quran says in Surah Namal, chapter 27, verse number 17 and 18, that before Solomon marched the hosts of jinns, men and birds, and when they reached a lowly valley of ants, one of the ants said, "Get ye into your habitations, lest Solomon and his hosts unknowingly will trample you beneath the feet." People will think, what kind of a fairy tale book is the Holy Quran? This book, the Holy Quran, it's speaking about ants. Ants talking among themselves. It's a fairy tale book. Today we have come to know that any animal or any insect which has the closest resemblance to that of the human being, it is the ant. The ant bury the dead the same way as the human beings do. They have a sophisticated method and division of labor where they have manager, supervisor, workers, etc. They very often meet to chat. They have a sophisticated method of communication. They have marketplaces where they exchange goods. And when they store the grain in winter, and if the grain begins to bud, the ant cut the bud as though they knew that budding will cause rotting of the grain. And monsoon, if the grain gets wet, they bring it out in the sunlight to dry. Surely you might have seen the ants carrying grains in the sunlight to dry, as though they knew that humidity will cause the development of root system, which will cause rotting of the grain. So Quran speaks about the advanced nature of the ants 1400 years ago. In the field of medicine, the Holy Quran says in Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse number 60 and 69, that from the belly of the bee you get a drink of varying colors in which there is healing for mankind. It's recently we have come to know that the honey we have is derived from the bee. It's the bee which is responsible for the honey. We did not know about this before. And today we know honey has got high nutritive values. It's rich in vitamin K and fructose. And it has got mild antiseptic properties. No wonder the Russian soldiers, they used honey to cover up their wounds, which prevented the evaporation of moisture and left very little scar tissue. Any person suffering from an allergy of a particular plant, if honey produced from that plant is given, that person starts developing resistance to that allergy. In the field of physiology, it was Ibn Nafis who 600 years after the revelation of the Holy Quran described the blood circulation. And 1000 years after the revelation of the Holy Quran, that is 400 years after Ibn Nafis described the blood circulation, William Harvey, he made it famous to the Western world. The food that we eat, it enters the stomach, it enters the intestine. From the intestine, it goes into the blood vessels of the intestine and enters the blood circulation. And the blood circulation takes the food substance to various organs, including the mammary glands, which produce milk. The Quran speaks about the blood circulation and the production of milk in a nutshell in Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse number 66, where it says that verily in the cattle is a lesson for you. We give you to drink from what is within the bodies, coming from the conjunction of the constituent of the intestine and blood, milk which is pure and pleasant for those who drink. The Quran says in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse number 21, which is also recited by our Qari, Brother Ashraf Muhammadi, it says that verily in the cattle is an instructive sign for you. We give you to drink from what is within the bodies, in which there is various benefits, and of the meat you can eat. Quran describes the blood circulation and the production of milk in a nutshell 1400 years ago. In the field of embryology, there were a group of Arab students who collected all the matter in the Holy Quran dealing with embryology, and they followed the guidance of the Holy Quran in Surah Furqan, chapter 25, verse 59, which says, if you are in doubt, ask the person who knows, ask the person who is knowledgeable. So they took all these data given in the Holy Quran, dealing with embryology, and presented it to Professor Keith Moore. Professor Keith Moore is the head and chairman of the Department of Anatomy in the University of Toronto in Canada, and is one of the leading authorities in the world in the field of embryology. When Professor Keith Moore went through the translation of the various verses of the Quran dealing with embryology, he said that most of the thing which the Quran speaks about embryology is matching with the latest discoveries made in the field of embryology. But there are a couple of things which I cannot say that they are right. Neither can I say that they are wrong, because I myself do not know about it. And one such verse was from Surah Iqra, or Surah Alaq, chapter 96, verse number 1 and 2, which says, Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq. Read, recite, or proclaim in the name of thy Lord who created the human beings from something which clings, a leech-like substance. So Professor Keith Moore said, I do not know whether the embryo looks like a leech or not. So he went in his laboratory and under a very powerful microscope examined the shape of the early stage of embryo and compared it with a photograph of a leech. And he was astonished at the striking resemblance. And when he was asked about 80 questions on embryology, taken from the Holy Quran and Hadith, he said that if you would have asked me all these things 30 years ago, I would not be able to answer more than 50% of this. Because embryology, the development of embryology, is just recently, hardly 30 to 50 years, it's advanced. And Professor Keith Moore, he has written a book, The Developing Human. And in his new edition, the third edition, he has incorporated the new things which he found from the Quran and the Hadith, for which he got an award for the best medical book written in that year by any single author. And later on, this book was translated into several languages of the world. Professor Keith Moore said, I have got no objection in accepting that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of God Almighty, and that the Holy Quran has to be a divine revelation. The Holy Quran says in Surah Tariq, chapter 86, verse number 5 to 7, let now man think from what he's created. He's created from a drop, emitted from a space between the backbone and the ribs. Today we have come to know the genital organs, the testes in the males and the ovaries in the female. In the embryonic age, they develop from a space where the kidney is present today, between the backbone and the 11th and 12th rib. Later on, the testes, they descend through the inguinal colon into the scrotum, and the ovaries in the female to the true pelvis. But in the embryonic age, it's in the space where the Quran speaks about, between the backbone, the spinal column, and the 11th and 12th rib. Even in the adult life, after the genital organs they descend, yet they receive the blood supply, the nerve supply, and the lymphatic drainage from the same space between the spinal column and the 11th and 12th rib. The Holy Quran mentions in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse number 13, as well as in Surah Al-Hajj, chapter 22, verse number 5, that we have created the human beings from a nutfah. The Arabic word nutfah, that the human beings have been created from nutfah, is mentioned in the Quran no less than 11 times. And the word nutfah is mentioned 12 times. But human beings created from nutfah is mentioned 11 times. The Arabic word nutfah means a minute quantity of liquid. The Holy Quran says in Surah Sajda, chapter 32, verse number 8, that we have created the human beings from a quintessence of liquid. The Arabic word is sulala, meaning a minute quantity.